I'm not that sentimental about cameras and lenses. To be honest, I'm not that sentimental at all, except for It's a Wonderful Life. The ending always gets me, particularly after a glass of eggnog. But photographic equipment, no, unless it's paying its way, I see no reason to keep a camera or a lens. The only cameras I have which I don't use are either broken or are completely financially worthless. So in that vein, I have a Canon G10 with me. Now I bought this 17 years ago, but for the past 10, Mrs. T has had it, but she has a shiny new camera, so I've got it back. So today I'm going to take it out for a spin. I'm here in Bellingham in Northumberland. I'm going to see what it's capable of, see whether I still like it, see whether I can use it in my everyday work, and if not, well, off it goes. So this could actually be a sort of swan song, a little bit of a goodbye to that camera. Well, I found my first location. Here's a very short slideshow showing what it's capable of, what I've shot in the dim and distant past. So I'll see you in a few minutes where we'll start shooting. Do you know something? Aesthetically, this is still a very pleasing camera. It has an appealing chunkiness to it. You know, it fits into the hand quite nicely. And I do like the pseudo-retro dials on the top for the exposure compensation and ISO. And they all click quite nicely too. Not sure whether you can hear that or not. One thing I really liked on this camera was the close-up focusing mode. Now, it was never macro, so I could never do sort of true one-to-one focusing, but it was still pretty decent. It was still a good close-up mode. And I saw this tree, and I really liked the berries on it. They're really sort of vibrant red, contrasted with the pale green of the lichen that's growing in amongst the branches. So I'm going to give this a go. There's some nice light falling on it as well. The sun has just popped out, which is great. Yeah, I think this could be worth a few minutes shooting with the G10. This is where it's starting to show its age. The focusing isn't that rapid, and it's very hesitant too. It is struggling to lock onto some of these berries. It's getting there, but it's not the fastest. Now, one thing I never liked about this camera was the optical viewfinder, which doesn't show you everything that you're shooting. I think it's about 70% of the view, which isn't great. And obviously you can't see any focusing information or any exposure information. So when you're focusing, it's just blind guesswork essentially. So I rarely, if ever, use the viewfinder and relied on the screen entirely, which to me, I have to admit, was always a bit unnatural. I do like a good viewfinder. The screen resolution isn't that great, but it is nearly 2 decades old, so that's understandable. Now, because the light's a bit dim, the sun has just gone back in again. It's behind cloud. I'm having to raise the ISO, which should be interesting because from what I remember, it's a fairly noisy camera, above 400, 800 ISO. That could be recovered using the latest in noise suppression software. So that could be interesting. I might even try the top 1600. See what that's like. And that really should avoid any camera shake, particularly when using the telephoto at its maximum extent. Now, because this camera has such a small sensor, the focal length of the lens is relatively short, even at the long end, which does sound a bit counterintuitive, but trust me on this. The upshot is that even at the telephoto end of the lens and at maximum aperture, so I'm going to be using f5, which is the maximum aperture at this focal length, you still get lots of depth of field. So it gets really hard to isolate your subject. I'm shooting over here. I've got these sort of dead plants here, which I think make a quite interesting shot. But I want the background to be blurred. It's quite a busy background, and I think if it was blurred, it would be less distracting. But I suspect, again, because of the quite astonishing depth of field of this camera at times, I'm not going to be able to achieve that, which is a bit frustrating, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. Once you use the viewfinder there, realise that I shouldn't be. Yeah, and selecting the focus point is a bit clunky as well. No touch screens on this particular camera. So I'm now on the path to Hareshaw Linn. Now, Linn is the Northumbrian word for waterfall, and Hareshaw Linn, in my opinion, is the most photogenic waterfall in the county. Now, I did shoot a video about it some 7 years ago, I think, when I looked a whole lot younger, which I really don't want to think about. But anyway, if I get this right, there'll be a link either there or there, so you can see that video. But otherwise, I'm going to follow this path here and look for other things to shoot until I eventually get to the waterfall itself. So I'll see you in a few minutes. Now, I've mentioned not being sentimental about cameras, but there are one or two that I sort of regret selling. The first of which is the Hasselblad X-Pan, which was a real quality instrument, really easy to use and fun to use. And I really regret selling that now, because having seen how used prices have climbed in recent years, that would have actually made quite a sensible investment to have kept that. But you know, what can you do? Then there's the Nikon D70, which was my first digital SLR and a worthy introduction into digital photography. The Canon 5D, which was my first full frame digital SLR. The Nikon D800, which was a real workhorse. I mean, whatever you could throw at it, it would cope with very, very well. Then there's the Panasonic S1R, which is a real bruiser of a camera, and I would have kept that. The image quality from the files was fantastic, but for me I think it was just too heavy, which is why I switched to Micro Four Thirds, which is obviously what I'm using now. And the Olympus OM1 goes into that pantheon, into the Hall of Fame. I've had it for what, 12, 13 months now, and I'm so enjoying using it. I think I've shot more this year than with any other camera in any previous year, which I think is a real testament to how much fun it is, how much I'm enjoying using it. So yeah, that one, for the moment anyway, is one that I'm not going to part with. One thing I really like about the Canon G10 is the fact that it has a built-in 3-stop ND filter, which is good because the lens doesn't have a filter ring, so you can't really attach filters to it. So having that built-in ND filter is great for situations like this, where I'm going to shoot this river and I want to use a slightly longish exposure just to blur the movement a little bit, but not so much that it all just becomes a white, indistinguishable mass. Now there has been a lot of rain recently, so the river's quite full, which makes it a bit more tricky. Ideally I'd want less water than this, but it is what it is. So I'm going to shoot this. I'll pop whatever I shoot on screen after this, and I'm going to head off further into the Dean. A few things I've noticed with this camera. The first is that I tend to be shooting different types of shot compared to what I'd normally shoot with a more professional camera, if you like. I'm not sure why that should be. Perhaps just because it's a compact camera, I'm just feeling slightly more playful, possibly. But the other thing I've noticed is that the dynamic range is far less than a modern camera. So I'm having to be very, very careful with the exposure. So in this case, I've underexposed by 1/3 of a stop, 2/3 of a stop, just to retain highlight details. And I'm not worrying too much about the shadow of the tree trunk in the foreground. I can perhaps raise that later in post-production. But anyway, I'll take the shot. If it works, I shall pop it on screen after this. Weirdly, there are very few cameras that I regret buying. I like to do a lot of research before I buy a camera, reading reviews and watching YouTube videos, that kind of thing. So I try not to buy a camera on a whim. I think that's quite the simplest way to end up being disappointed. But no, I can't think of anything specific where I've thought, ooh yeah, I wish I hadn't bought that. Now, it's your turn. What's your favourite camera? And are there any that you've really, really regretted buying later and hasn't really lasted long in your possession? Well, I'm at Hareshaw Linn now, and because of all the rain that we've had recently, the waterfall's very full, so I don't think it's going to make that pleasing a shot, so I haven't bothered on this occasion. Instead, I've been mainly sort of shooting small details, sort of water cascading over rocks, that kind of thing, down in Hareshaw Burn. But now I'm going to make my way back. This is essentially a dead end, so once you get here, all you can do is turn around and go back again. Somewhere along the way, I'm going to come to some conclusion about the G10, see what I think about it. But yeah, let's go before the sun sets and it gets too dark to see where we're going. What do I think of the G10? Well, I really, really wanted to like it. And I do have very, very fond memories of using it in the early 2010s. And I do like its body still. It does feel well built and it's solid and it's chunky. But there were a good few things which really I didn't like. I think the controls were a bit fiddly. There's no touch screen, so you can't really set functions that way. You have to rely entirely on the manual controls on the back. The viewfinder I really don't like. It's an optical viewfinder, and like I say, it's a 70% view, so it's really hard to compose and sort of focus at the same time. But things move on, technology moves on, and this is, it's getting on for 2 decades old, so it's not surprising that there are things which perhaps are suboptimal now compared to current cameras. Whether I keep it or not, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm going to sleep on it. Yeah, I'm going to sleep on it. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that video. Please do share, like and subscribe. And please do join me next week, where I'll be in some corner of Northumberland again. Probably with my proper camera this time. So until then, goodbye. You thought you got rid of me, but no. The walk to the Hareshaw Linn is mainly in a little cavern, essentially. So you don't really get to see direct sunlight in the depths of winter. But now that I'm back on higher ground, there's some really nice light from the sun, which is just setting over there in the southwest. And there's some wonderful light on these trees above me. And I'll just show you what I mean. Well, with light back gorgeous, I have to take a few shots, don't I? So if any of those work, I'll pop them on screen. But for now, this really is goodbye. Goodbye.